Well, welcome everybody to the Neighborhood Food Network. My name is Ann Temple, and I'm going to be your host this evening as Zen Honeycutt is traveling from the Children's Health Defense and Weston A. Price conferences in Tennessee. So she'll be back with us next week to give us an update on that. And hopefully she's going to be giving a video update. She said it's been fantastic. Tonight, I am super excited to have Crystal Brown on the call with us. I met Crystal at the Midwest Wild Harvest Festival back in September in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. Crystal Brown of Inspired North is an ethnobotanical educator, bioregional herbalist, and writer creative, focusing on wild edible food and medicinal plants and fungi. She assists students in developing connections to nature, self, and community through creative outdoor experiences that incorporate an integrative approach to health, wellness, art, and personal growth. She has a background working as a psychiatric mental health nurse with children, adolescents, and adults, and is a wilderness first responder. Crystal lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and teaches in-person group classes and community events, as well as one-on-one learning and mentoring opportunities, working with people of all ages. She will be expanding her teaching, mentoring to be offered online over the next winter months. Her mission and intention with her work is to cultivate an intimate, intentional, healing, and reciprocal relationship with the plants, fungi, and creatures around us in order to build and restore a relationship with the self and community through reclaiming her knowledge of wild food and medicine, to create safe spaces for vulnerability that allow us to creatively cultivate growth, love, beauty, and sovereignty. I'm going to put her contact info in the post, and I'll also be sending this out and for her information out with the email. But this harvest festival we were at was fantastic. There was so much stuff to be learned, and what Crystal knows was fantastic. I actually spent a lot of time, Michelle, who's on the call with us, spent a lot of time at her booth. And so Crystal, welcome. Oh, you'll have to unmute.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on too. I'm
Well,
really
if there was anything I left out, feel free to tell us any more about yourself.
I guess like I might share like a snippet of a background of like how I got into what I'm doing now. So as a young girl, I was always very interested in nature. That was a very safe place for me. And I tried to get outdoors a lot, but I didn't have like a whole lot of like adult guidance when I was younger to kind of guide the interest in the play that I had exploring the natural world. So as like a little girl, I'd be like picking mushrooms or flowers or making little creations out of them and building little forts. But there wasn't like that passed on knowledge from my family to share that. And in high school, I had some teachers that were really encouraging of getting out in the outdoors, and had a couple like wild plants taught to me at that time. So I was originally going to go on for environmental education, but ended up taking a detour from that and going on to become a registered nurse. And I worked for about 11 years in the mental health field, really trying to promote from an inpatient setting, working with like alternative treatments, like trying to promote aromatherapy and deep breathing and movement. There is definitely a heavy focus on prescriptions and the current medical model, which does not fully allow for integrating a multifaceted approach. There is work towards that, but with a lot of the pressures on trying to get folks through the door, I was finding frustration in not being able to do the things that I felt very moved to do in terms of trying to connect people to more natural methods. And then also having like a healthy work environment. As a registered nurse, I have many friends and coworkers still in the field, and it's not really a system conducive to the health of the caregiver either. So I decided to take a break about 4 years ago, actually, come November, to take a sabbatical and start spending time pursuing the things that interested me and that aligned with my own ethics and values, and try to discover what that was. And through that process, started getting back into exploring nature, and from a more deeper level in terms of exploring the medicinal properties of plants, and then also foraging and getting into like finding mushrooms and wild food. And as I started that, when I started the sabbatical journey, it just went off from there. And I found myself reconnecting to how I had passions as a child and a young adult, and really looking at how do we have a more holistic approach to health that is not like alternative health, but actual natural health that aligns with our bodies and how we've evolved over time to be. And there's a lot of pressure in society, and I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, in terms of just trying to have quick fixes, over prescription of pharmaceuticals, not necessarily looking at where our food is coming from in our diets and our movement and our stress management. And so I really had a big change in my own personal life during those 4 years, switching to eating organic or organically principled foods, incorporating a lot of wild food into my diet, herbs, taking a break from just the toxic culture of the fast-paced, like consumptive model, and really slowing down and reconnecting with nature and my community, and looking at ways of like, okay, how can I get involved in community gardening? How can I get involved with teaching kids, volunteering at a school, teaching gardening, things like that. And then of my own personal health, just looking at how am I integrating like meditation and breath work and movement. And I had huge shifts in my own health, as well as just even my own joy too. And the last year and a half, I've been working towards sharing that experience and that knowledge with others as I've grown, because it's, even though I'm 4 years into this now, there are people who have been doing this their whole lifetime, and we can't get this information out fast enough,
No.
and we have to, I really fully believe, no matter at what level we are at in our practices of agricultural practices in our own life, or our foraging, or our use of herbs, no matter where you're at, everyone can also be a teacher, even if it's one thing that you're teaching to a loved one or a friend. Or today I was at the credit union, and I was talking with the clerk, and I said to her, I gave her a suggestion on doing like a deep breathing exercise, and she's like, shifts in behavior, they can be overwhelming when you try to do everything at once. And I'm like, well, let's, like, every time I come in here, let's do one new thing and just integrate things slowly. And so it's like we can do that not only formally in classes, but just informally in our community, and just being of service to each other, and offering a suggestion kindly where maybe we would have just been quiet or just ignore that. And it's a way of kind of like a loving kindness that we can share with each other. And that's how we reclaim community, are those moments of vulnerability and sharing and connection, putting ourselves out there. And I really want to promote that also with the work that I'm doing beyond
well, you say you may be preaching to the choir, but the one thing I have noticed from all these calls, especially the Neighborhood Food Network, because we do focus on gardening, but we're also focusing on this as a way to be healthy. I always come away with this having learned something new. And when I went to the Midwest Wild Harvest Festival, my brain exploded. I look at my backyard in a completely different way. I have talked about it on some previous calls about the powerful medicines that are literally in our backyards. And you're right, it can get overwhelming. But remember, if you take on one thing and you do it, 8 times, that it'll start to become a habit.
Right. Or learn one, do one, teach one.
Yes, you said, the students, the teachers can also be the students, because that's why they call it practicing medicine, or practicing this or practicing that.
Right.
Because you're never going to be fully done learning.
Right. Right.
So.
And I think when we start to take on like one thing, like the biggest thing I hear when I'm just talking to people in general about like foraging or herbalism is I'm afraid I'm going to kill myself. Like, I don't know what I'm going to eat out there, or I'm going to pick the wrong thing and poison myself. And, it's overcoming that initial fear in learning to rebuild trust within ourselves that we're competent at learning and making judgments based on the information that we're given and the information we seek out in our own sovereignty too, and like reclaiming that sense of sovereignty and trust in ourselves, because we have a lot of like external like locus of control in terms of decisions being made for us or pressure to kind of go with the flow. And part of this whole process, even for my own self, was like rebuilding that trust. And when you take one thing at a time, like the first time you pick, like, let's say a common herb that's going to be in your yard, plantain. Many people have heard of that. It's like nature's first aid band-aid, and like the first time you ever like look it up and try using it, like chewing it up and putting it as a poultice on a cut, you learn so much about learning through that process and overcoming that fear. Because like it's that initial step of like pushing past and learning how to learn a new skill. And you can take that and apply that mode of learning to the other things that you bring on, the other friends. I like to call them friends. A lot of herbalists call them friends, our plants, our fungi that we integrate into our life. But you learn how to make new friendships and new relationships one at a time. Like we know how to make friends with other people. So it's the same process as we get to know these plants and these mushrooms and even the trees that are around us too.
I will say mushrooms do kind of scare me unless I know, like chicken of the woods or something. Sure. Unless I know that's a whole area right into itself.
Oh, definitely.
As far as plantain, I got stung on both hands at the same time by ground wasps, and I literally was chomping on plantain, and it actually worked. Mm-hmm. And so that's what made me want to learn more. So, and it's nutritious.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely, and like the abundance that we have around us in terms of what's available in the natural world, it's amazing. I was out this week alone, and I went for a quick hike at one of my favorite places, and I found a huge maitake mushroom. I found a couple herbs that I was looking for. Like right now, rose hips are in season in Wisconsin. We've just had some of our first frost, so it's the perfect time to be picking those. They have like a high vitamin C content. But I taught a hike on Saturday to a group of people at a local park foundation, and I was telling them, it's like I always find more than what I need out there, and then that gives the opportunity for community too. Because as we find these things, even in our own backyard, or in our local areas, we can start to share them with others and bring them into the fold of the conversation too. And then that's where you tap into the abundance of knowledge in our communities. Maybe you might not know like how to can food, for example, but maybe you have a neighbor that maybe sometimes you don't talk to that often. And they're like, oh, I used to do canning with my grandma. And then that's an opportunity to connect and share knowledge and build that network that, we're trying to do with our gardening. We can do that in sharing our other things like our foraging and our herbs as well.
So as far as what maybe we can do for the coming winter, and if you want to maybe talk a little bit about your fire cider and your other, I know you had probably some other elixirs. I know you make your own kombucha too.
I do oxymals and shrubs. I haven't gotten into kombucha yet, but that's going to definitely be a fun winter project.
Can you explain what oxymals and shrubs are for those who don't know?
Yeah. So fire cider itself, is a type of oximal. And let's back up and talk about oximals. Oximal, basically, it's raw honey and typically apple cider vinegar that's been infused with herbs or mushrooms to pull out the medicinal values in them. And that's a traditional remedy or medicine for many, many years, thousands of years. We've had those ingredients, acid and honey, and together they make that. Both raw apple cider vinegar and honey have probiotic and immune boosting components in them of themselves. And so when you pull in the herbs in it too, that adds further. So the process of making an oximal, you're basically like soaking or kind of marinating the herbs, so to speak, in the apple cider vinegar for a period of time. I like to hit about a month for my own self, like just to get a full infusion of that. But I have done some oximals in a couple weeks time. But basically, after you're soaking your different herbs in your apple cider vinegar, you strain them off. And then you mix in a proportion of raw honey into it to thicken it and sweeten it. Some folks might just do like a shot of the apple cider vinegar itself that's infused, but it definitely goes down a little bit better with the raw honey. And then you get those properties of it and it's soothing. So shrubs are similar in the sense that they have apple cider vinegar and honey in them. Sometimes they use maple syrup, and it's more of like an enhanced sipping vinegar or drink. So it does have some medicinal values, but you don't necessarily brew or infuse the vinegar for that long. You often make a tea out of your herbs and mix it with the raw honey and apple cider vinegar versus infusing apple cider vinegar for a long period of time. So you get some benefit out of it, but it's more enjoyable in drinking. So you can mix that with seltzer water, or some people actually sip it in small amounts. Getting back to oximals and fire cider. So fire cider is more of a popular type of oximal that was coined by actually the herbalist Rosemary Gladstar is most commonly known for that recipe, which is very much been shared across like the herbalism community. There's lots of different recipes. There's even been companies that have marketed it and tried to actually take away the rights to the name fire cider. But how do we get the name fire cider? So it's that apple cider vinegar infused with some really nice immune boosting packed ingredients. So we've got onions, garlic, jalapeno peppers, horseradish, ginger. So you really get that fire, that kick in it. Some people even put turmeric in theirs. I personally choose not to put turmeric in my blend, just from a taste flavor profile. But I use citrus in mine. And then some individuals will add other herbs to their fire cider blend to balance it out. So in mine, I like to pull in some of the bioregional available herbs that I forage in there. So I like to put bee balm in there, which is, a replacement for a typical garden would be thyme, because I like the bee balm. It's a plant in the mint family, but it has a high thymal content, which is a very good antimicrobial. And it's also really good for airway respiratory health. So I put that in there, and it has a very beautiful flavor to it. You can even make a straight up oximal of just bee balm, and it's very good for like if you have a bad cough or sore throat.
Do you put it in fresh or do you dry it?
That's a great question. So for my herbs themselves, I put them in dry because I'm trying to reduce the amount of water content in there. Now, like the veggies that I put in there, like the onion, the ginger, the garlic, that I put them in there fresh. So it does have water content to it, but I usually have dried bee balm in my medicine cabinet already. And so that it's just reducing the amount of water in there. The amount of apple cider vinegar and the honey in there help as a preservative too, to help with some shelf stability, so you don't have mold as much. I also put in like chaga, which is a mushroom, as well as artist conch, which is a polypore mushroom, and those are both have immune boosting properties to them. And I put those in dry as well. I add elderberry and elderflower. The elderberry, if I have fresh or frozen elderberry, I'll throw it in there, but I've also done it dry. And then the rose hips I add in dry, and I even put a little bit of yarrow in there. Some folks will put echinacea in there too, to add the echinacea boosting.
Now, would that be the flowers or the root?
The flower and the leaf is what I use in the,
and you can dry those, because I have a ton of echinacea in my yard and I haven't done anything with it.
Oh, definitely, definitely. That dries really well. So like, let's say you have some flowers yet in your yard. Now we have like a few days left before we're gonna have to wrap up shop with our harvesting with the weather changes. But what I like to do is I'll snip the heads off of the stems and just lay them out like on a cookie sheet, or if I have a dehydrating rack, I'll put it on there, or even a plate. As long as there's airflow getting to it, that'll dry up real nicely. And then I actually use the heads of the flowers. Like what I'll do is I'll pull the petals off and the leaves off of that too, but I'll save those heads and make tincture out of the heads for echinacea tincture, because there's still medicinal value in that stem and that flower head itself.
Yeah, I was told, well, mine will be 3 years next year, but that you should wait 3 years before you start harvesting the root. Definitely. But mine are spreading all over the place, so I feel comfortable that I'm not going to be wiping out my beautiful flowers.
Definitely. Like, yeah, I think as long as you're like thinning it out a little bit, I don't see there'd be a problem with that. And you can dry it after you clean that root. If you're harvesting the echinacea root, you can dry it out in the same method, like air drying it, to just try not to have things piled up, because if you're using just an air drying method, whether you're hanging something or laying it flat on trays, if you have things piled up, you risk having mold formation with there. Some folks use actual dehydrators to dry herbs, and that's totally cool too. I just have found like I'll do kind of a low and slow method, and by the time this time of year, the heat in my home like adds enough heat in the air to dry out the humidity to it too. So after you get all those things like in your apple cider vinegar, I like to leave it for at least a month, just to get a good infusion in it. I have had it in a couple weeks time too, but I've also left it longer than a month. When I was first getting started making fire cider, you know, lifestyle changes take time. And so that my busyness affected my ability to get my projects done that I was working on. And your fire cider, let's say you don't get to it in a month or even 2 months, it's still going to be fine. And then just you strain it off when you get to it too.
So here's mine that I made Michelle and I made this last night. Awesome. So I put the date on it, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Now, one of the things about fire cider, and I will put Rosemary Gladstar's recipe up here. You do after you strain it, you should refrigerate it, correct?
Well, I think there's a lot of debate back and forth on that. When I'm doing it at home, and then the ones that I do sell to folks, I add the honey to it, and after I strain it, and I'll leave it in a canning jar. I don't water bath can it, because that heat would kill off the microbes of the raw honey and apple cider vinegar. But I give it about like 6 months of like, I don't know, best quality, not refrigerated. If you put it in the fridge, it's going to last longer. Like it'll push it to a year. If I do recommend, like if you are making it and you're opening up your jar, like I would put it in the fridge after you start using it, just to help promote like the quality of it. It's, if you leave it out on your counter, it's not going to spoil right away. It takes a long time. I've used fire cider when I was first getting started, that was like a year old. It didn't have the same potency of flavor in it, but it didn't spoil from like a shelf stability
And how much
perspective.
do you recommend that we take? Now, I've been reading that just basically people will take a shot a day because this is going to help pump up your correct? It's going to help
Right.
pump your immune system. It's antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal. It's all good things.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
also got a little kick to it, so it's probably going to be a surprise the first time you take it, but then after that, you're kind of like this.
Right. Yeah, I definitely, a shot a day is kind of a good rule of thumb, especially during like cold and flu season or the winter months. I usually do my shots in the morning. And so, especially if I haven't had coffee, it is a nice awakening kind of effect to it. So, or like last week I was doing substitute teaching. And so I ended up taking a couple shots a day just to help add an added boost to my immune system, because I was around a lot of little kids that had lots of little colds. And I just wanted to make sure with that added work stress that I was supporting my immune system as well. So beyond like, and some folks don't take it daily, and that's okay too. I'll go through phases where if I'm doing a lot of teas, maybe I'll back off of it for a while, but this time of year I'm taking a shot pretty much daily. If I, let's say I do like an event, or if I have like a really stressful week, I'm doing it a couple times a day. Or if I do feel like any kinds of symptoms coming on, like, you usually get like a scratchy sore throat or lots of just congestion coming on when you're getting sick, that's a sign to start taking more of something like that. So then I'll do 3 times a day when I'm having symptoms.
So
And
Annie says, can you blend it and eat the goo?
okay, I haven't blended it. I guess you could, but what I have done is I've pulled out like the garlic and onion and eaten it as pickles. Like pickled garlic and pickled onion, and used it like that.
It would probably make a good salad dressing if you.
Oh yeah, yes. I will actually do that in a pinch. I'll take the fire cider with a little olive oil and shake it and do that. I've even used it like as a poaching liquid when I'm poaching eggs, just to add a little acid to it, or just in stir frying vegetables to add a little kick to it. And it's
See, I
really
just learned something new, and you said you're preaching to the choir. I bet everybody else did too.
So another thing, if you want to if you're looking for an adult beverage, or even without an adult beverage, you can mix it with seltzer water too, and add it as like a blend to a drink as well too.
So everybody, I just want to let you know that this was really easy to make. Now I'm going to say easy to make because I had Michelle, who's on the call with us, cutting up the horseradish and the onions and the garlic, and it cleared out her sinuses. She was crying a lot, but it was really easy for me. So, but yeah, I just highly recommend it. And I actually threw out a whole jar of it because I read that it should be refrigerated. I wish I hadn't, but now I will know. And how often, so once this is strained, I would say you're probably going to get maybe a pint of fire cider from a quart.
Or more. It like, you might even get a little bit more than a pint from there,
So,
depending on how much.
do you succession, you're doing a succession of jars of fire cider?
Right. Like at home, I would be planning, some as you get going. So like if you're, when you're straining something off, that might be a good sign for you to like, hey, start another batch up. It kind of goes through how fast you're using it too. And in your family, are you the only person drinking it? Are you able to get it into your kiddos or not? That sort of thing. So it's definitely something to keep going. I make bigger batches of it because of just like I do incorporate it a lot, I gift it a lot, and then I do sell some too with some of my work. And so I'm making bigger batches of it. But yeah, it's definitely something during the season, like, okay, around this time you get your first batch going, or even prior to this would be okay. And then like in a month or 3 weeks, you could start another jar of it, depending on how fast you're going through it.
So fire cider, one of the things that causes the fire is the jalapenos and the cayenne pepper. So for those who are very sensitive to spicy foods, in other words, most children,
right?
Can you leave that out and have it still be potent?
Definitely. Yeah, like I made a blend last year because I had a request from a friend, and I left out horseradish and jalapeno from it, and I added a little bit more garlic and more citrus. But for my own personal blend, like I feel like the other herbs that I'm adding help complemented that. So I think that would be fine in that case, to do that. It's really like one of those things, like the first time I made like my batch, like I have a recipe that I use now that's like my normal blend. And then this last year I did a forager's blend where I incorporated more foraged ingredients in it. So using ramps, which is a wild onion. And instead of horseradish and garlic, I used an invasive species called garlic mustard. And it's fruit. And oh my gosh, that blend, like I was just like, it was great. And but like garlic mustard has similar properties to horseradish, and it has the garlic flavor. So you really can have a lot of fun with it and adapt it. A few years ago, I made like a Christmas like blend where I was doing like cranberries and cinnamon and even some pine to try to see like, did I like that flavor profile? And so I really encourage you to have fun with it. Like definitely start with like like kind of like the original recipe that, and Rosemary has that out there, and Anne's going to share that.
Yeah, I did. I put the link in.
And that's a really great one to go with, but don't be afraid to add a few things to it. There's some books out there. Actually, I think Rosemary has a book with like 30 different recipes.
I thought I had the book yesterday and I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it, but yeah, it's just like this recipe that I posted of hers could be like a base, and then you can be
right,
kind of like Dwight's cordials that
exactly
that are fantastic.
Yes. Yeah. So, and you really can make it an interactive experience. So like one of the best ways to get like herbal type medicines into people is to involve them in the process. So if you got like kiddos or a skeptical partner or family member, like be like, hey, let's go to the garden and pick these herbs ourselves. Or, hey, my parents or someone has like horseradish growing in their yard. Hey, can I dig that up? I know it's a pain for you. Like, and I'm going to use it for this. So talking about it and involving them in it, kids, especially if they're involved in making their own medicines, they are more likely to take them because it's fun. It's an experiment.
And I think it's the same way with vegetables. If they're in the garden helping growing it, planting, especially if they start from planting the seed through the growing, they're so much more likely.
Definitely.
And Frankie said that she found out that a weed in her garden is horseradish. The bumper crop is a blessing since each quart uses a half cup of greatest horseradish. That's like amazing.
Definitely. Now bringing up horseradish, a little tip that I've used, because some people don't like to use like the grater with it. And like I've read like in some recipes, like put a mask on, like the goggles or something, so you don't get the fumes in your eye. The thing that I've found that works really well for me with horseradish, I take a vegetable peeler and I peel it instead of grate it, and do thin peels, and then I chop those, and I don't get as much of like the fumes from grating it or the juices like going up in the air, but it still works perfectly fine in the infusion.
Oh, well, I wish Michelle probably wishes she'd known that last night. She said LOL. So what other things do you have? Like, what about elderberry syrup? Now, that I do know that you have to keep that refrigerated, because I went to send Zen's. I made a batch of elderberry syrup, and I went to send it to my friend, to Zen, who's normally here. And I forgot the box at work, and then I went to go mail it and found out that the bottle had exploded.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, elderberry syrup is definitely one of those that has shelf stability issues. So refrigerating it, I'm actually going to experiment this fall with a shelf stable recipe. I found there's a forager called the Appalachian Forager who's on social media, and she has a shelf stable recipe where she does some sort of fermentation with the elderberries first to basically create a little bit of like elderberry alcohol, and then mixes that with the syrup she makes with the other elderberries. And I have seen some folks put in like vodka in their recipes to help with shelf stability, but you have to be careful too with taste, or if you're like giving it to your kiddos, you might not want to have that there. So the first time I ever made elderberry syrup, I used Mama Wellness, or Wellness Mama, I think it is.
Yeah, I love her. She's got
Yeah, that recipe is like on point. It gives a really great flavor and really good immune boosting support. So like that's the one I would recommend to use.
I think that's the recipe I used, and it was great.
Yeah. And yeah, so like do that, and then just be conscious of like your use. Like I know when I was first getting started in some of this, like even making tinctures or making oxymals or things, I'd make like these big batches, and then I would like make more than what I needed. Like the first time I made thyme tincture, I made like way too much thyme tincture, and I still have thyme tincture, and you can gift it away too, but sometimes there's only so much you can gift, like zucchini, sometimes people are like, okay, enough already. So just be mindful of your resources too. And you can always start with a small batch and then, use that as a learning experience and go ahead and make another batch later, too. But
so Lisa has a question. Do you want to ask a question, Lisa?
Yeah, hi Crystal, hi everybody, great to hear you. No, I just wanted to add, I make something, it's similar to an oxymel, it's the same ingredients but it's different. I take a jar and I fill it with garlic cloves, so I peel the cloves and I pour apple cider vinegar on it, and then I infuse that for about a month, and then what I do is I pour off the liquid, and I put half the liquid back in with the garlic and the other half honey. So if I pour out a cup of apple cider vinegar, I'm going to put half back in and then another half cup of honey. And the half that I didn't put back in, I can actually start another batch with that. It's like the mother. So what I do with that is I let that infuse. Actually, the longer you keep it in, the better. And when I get sick, I just eat the garlic cloves. So it's like my medicine, preserved. And I'll add some apple cider vinegar to it after. Oh, did I say, yeah, apple cider vinegar? That's right. I didn't mean apple cider vinegar. No, I meant apple cider.
So I have heard of doing that. Well, I actually have a jar. I have a jar of garlic, and that's been sitting there for over a year, of garlic and honey.
Yeah. Oh,
but I'm not quite sure what actually to do with it.
Eat the garlic. It's so helpful. Just eat one of those every day.
Okay.
Yeah. And the honey. Oh my gosh, the honey is fabulous.
It's very watery now that it's been sitting in there. So
okay. I think it I had that happen when I did garlic honey too. And so I picked out the garlic from it. And then I just tried stirring it up a little bit, and because it does have like a little more liquidy format, but if you kind of get it back in there, it should be okay too.
All right. So what other tips do you have for us? We said we would have you on for a half hour. I don't know if anybody else has any questions for you.
I see some hands raised too for questions, and then
Oh,
I'll have some tips too beyond herbal things to share.
okay, let me get to the gallery. So, so Joan,
Oh, I just bought some fire cider. I live in Massachusetts. So it seemed like it was expensive. For this amount, it was 25 ml and it was $18.
Oh, wow.
And this is what it has. It's called Heart's Content Apothecary.
Thanks.
so I think you can make your own a lot cheaper.
Definitely. Yeah. And one thing of note that I didn't mention with the fire cider, so like in any of your medicines that you're making, making sure that you're picking the right ingredients. So definitely organic ingredients. It is sometimes difficult to source organic.
Organic. Yeah, but it also has jalapeno, garlic, ginger, horseradish, turmeric, cayenne, rosemary, local honey, onions, white pine.
Yep, that's basically fire cider.
Yep.
It's
So
good.
next time I put the link in here, Joan, maybe you could start a batch now. Save some money, because we're all about saving money here,
Definitely.
especially with growing our own food. It's really
it-
helped me.
And it's a good opportunity to barter and trade too. Like sourcing honey, for example. Let's say, someone who has bees, like you could work out something with them to get local honey, because the more local your honey is, the more immune boosting properties it has to your region, because the bees are pollinating the plants that are in your area. But it is difficult to source organic honey. So like the concept of the bees are going across areas, you are going to have risk of contamination no matter where you're getting your honey from. And so it's like, that's one of those things that, like in my own fire cider making, that's like the only ingredient that isn't certified organic that I put in there, or wild foraged. So there was another hand earlier. I don't know if it's Melanie.
Oh, Melanie.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Crystal. When it comes to certain plants, for the ingredients such as yarrow and echinacea, there are so many varieties now that have been developed as ornamentals. So does it matter what variety you use? And if so, what are some of the varieties that would be the best to use for these type of recipes?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I've heard debate from different herbalists either way. Some folks say that like even the ornamentals that have been like bred still have medicinal properties, and then I've had people say, oh, I don't trust that they will have the same medicinal properties. So that is a really that's a real challenge to kind of make that decision. There's not necessarily like research formally being done on that, besides like probably people just trying for what they have. A lot of the ingredients I use, I try to do wild crafted ingredients. I'm finding wild yarrow in picking flowers throughout the year. But last year I had a friend who raised some yarrow. He has a food forest in Green Bay and is promoting permaculture in the area. And he had some different yarrow varieties. I think I don't remember the exact name, but the word queen was in it of some sort. And it was actually a different color than the white traditional yarrow that you find out in the wild. And so I ended up using it for a fire cider batch and in teas, and even as like a stypic powder. Like you can grind up yarrow and put it in cuts to help stop bleeding. And I didn't see any difference in like the use of it. Like it still worked. So I don't remember the exact like the variety of it, but that is something like I think in my own journey I'm gonna have to find out as well. But I've heard it go either way. And I would think like the more like hybridized something is, the further it might be away from it because they're breeding it for like colors or size and things like that. I try to get as close to like the original plant as possible though. So like even my bee balm, I do like Monarda fistulosa, which is the wild bee balm. And you can get that, you know, in garden centers too. But I have heard that other like Monarda species of bee balm that you can get, like, I forget the Latin name of it, but there's one that's like more of a bright pink or almost like a red color. And that one, I had an herbalist friend say that that one worked, but the ones that are like these weird, wacky colors, she didn't even bother trying it because it might, she wasn't going to risk it.
So I grew, I ordered from, it's called Wild Bergamot Bee Balm. I got it from Baker Creek.
Okay.
And I planted the seeds and not much really happened. And this was 2 years ago. And this past summer, I had a massive plot of wild bee balm come up.
Yeah.
And Linda Black Elk, I told her that it got attacked by powdery mildew. And she said that you can tincture that with the powdery mildew and it makes a great medicine for like UTIs and other things, which I thought was just fascinating.
Yeah.
So,
bee balm is definitely, it's actually my favorite flower ever. And it's my favorite herb. Like I can't get enough of it. And it is one that's, it takes a couple years to get established. So if you are growing a medicinal herb garden at home or incorporating like native pollinator plants into your landscape, which one of my other passions is like gardening and volunteering with that and doing native prairie gardens. It does take about 2-3 years before it's fully established, and that's normal. So like your first year, your little bee balm might be like itty little bitty things.
right.
And what they're doing is they're starting to get their root system there. So don't go ahead and like plant something over it. Give it its time to grow. But yeah, it comes out. The powdery mildew, yes, like that one. Usually, especially in Wisconsin, we have a lot of humidity. So, you know, by middle of August, you start to really see it. And so for myself, like because I'm using my bee balm in different applications, like, and I try to dry it for like shelf storage. I pick it sooner than like when we start to see that mildew. And so like, don't be afraid, like it won't come back if you see that mildew. So right now with the fall, we start to see new growth coming up of some of these plants. So right now, a lot of the bee balm is reshooting out leaves to grow. There won't be more flowers, but you can have another round of foraging or harvesting.
Ooh, I'll have to go look.
Yeah, so I missed some of my window of my bee balm harvest because I was traveling out to Idaho and Montana to study with one of my mentors. And I'm getting a second shot at it right now. So I'm really thankful for that.
Wow. So yeah, so I'm learning so much, but you're right. I didn't plant anything over it because it's a little area that I kind of forgot about, but I was really happy when I saw that.
It's good.
I wasn't even sure what it was because the flowers are so much smaller. Also, I wanted to talk about the Harvest Festival, and what I learned is after we came home, I went out to a guy's farm where I bought a used pressure canner. And I was talking to him about his area because a lot of it was wooded and he had basically manicured paths to it. He didn't use any, he had 30 acres, he didn't use, and 130 acres, he didn't use any of it for farming. It was a lot of woods and everything. So I was thinking, oh my God, I want to come back here and go foraging. But then we were walking out to the back and he was pointing to all the goldenrod. He says, yeah, that stuff just kicking me in the butt as far as my hay fever. And so I was like able to tell him it's not the goldenrod. that's causing it. It's actually, this is good medicine. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and Lisa wants to know, she says, Crystal, may I ask who your mentors are?
Definitely. So I have a couple teachers that I've worked with more over the last couple of years. I've studied with Sam Thayer out of Wisconsin. He's very big into wild food foraging and has lots of books out there on the subject. And then Tom Elpel, he's in Montana. He's the author of Botany in a Day. So he looks at like how to use plants and identify them from a family perspective. And he does a lot of wild skills and like kind of more primitive skills in that. And then my main herbal mentor that I've studied with this last year has been Darcy Williamson, and she's out of Idaho. She's a bioregional herbalist out there, and has many books that are available, many of which the plants are in the same bioregion, or there's relatives of them here. So I'm finding even what I'm learning there, I'm able to apply here, whether it's directly with that plant or a relative, or just the concept of bioregional herbalism too. And so those are the folks I've mostly been studying with. But Darcy, her books are pretty thorough with recipes, especially, and she covers like the phytochemical components of plants, and she doesn't necessarily have links to the references of it, but because her books are like, you know, an inch big, but if she had all the references, they'd probably be 7 inches big. But she really does a lot of great work. And I've really appreciated her approach too. So
yeah, I put the links up here for Sam and Darcy, and the Body in a Day book links. I'll also send that out when I send out the email. But Sam Thayer, I bought 3 of his books before the Harvest Festival, and I actually was asking him questions back and forth, and he was fantastic. But he's somebody who has actually eaten and foraged every plant that he writes about. A lot of these foraging books, I have found out that they have not.
right.
So yeah, I really thought he was a great teacher. He had a 4-hour walk. I couldn't even make it through it. It was pouring rain out, and he was in shorts. We were all bundled up. He was in shorts and bare feet. I mean, the guy's a madman.
Yep, that sounds like Sam. Yeah, it's really important. I think when you're looking for mentors or classes or literature, like to look at like folks that have the relationships with the plant, like online too. Linda Black Elk, who you had mentioned, like she does a lot of social media posts. She is with the Lakota Sioux tribe in South Dakota, and she teaches ethnobotany and First Nation studies, and has a lot of knowledge and serves in an herbalist component for her community, but she posts about it too. But the big thing is building a relationship with those plants, in even the foods that we're eating. I didn't talk about like intention setting with medicine, but I'm going to kind of wrap that into another wellness tip. So like illness, winter, it's the seasonal changes this time of year. It's time for us to slow down, you know, and the rest of our society is like, we got to keep going. We got to get the kids to this, and we got to do this, and we got to buy all our stuff for the holidays, and we got to prep and do all these things. And what nature is doing right now is it's slowing down. It's time to go inward. And when we don't align with that, our bodies respond through illness. And so the illness is telling us to slow down. So even in our medicine making, like with your fire cider, if you're like, think of when you go to a restaurant and like people are rushing, people are rude, and like they're just like throwing stuff out. Does the food taste good? No, it doesn't. Same with your medicine making. If you got a lot of stuff on your brain if you're rushing from here to there, or maybe you just had a really bad experience that day, that is not the time to be making your medicine, because the love and intention and the energy that you put into what you're doing will show in your product. You'll either be sloppy or it just won't have that slowness to it. So just like making sure like you take the time to set up some space for yourself when you do that. And I like to think about like the intention of what I'm doing with it. Like, who am I making this medicine for? Like, even, and for my own self, when I'm harvesting herbs or mushrooms from the forest, I'm thinking about that intention from the very beginning. This is like, it's almost like if you've ever heard the term loving kindness meditation, like let your medicine making be a loving kindness meditation that you're extending love and kindness and health, not only to the people that are going to be reached by that medicine, whether it's your family or a loved one or a friend, but also yourself. Like, you're doing self-care, you're resisting the forces outside of us that tell us to keep going and push, push, push. And that's part of the change that we see in the world. And so we can do that with things like reclaiming this knowledge that all of our ancestors had, and slowing down and doing this the right way. And your medicine's going to be all the more better for it.
I think that those are great words to live by. I think people need to be more intentional with everything they do. And, you know, I get laughed at because I'm talking to my plants in the garden, telling them how great they are. But it's my happy place. And I do agree with you that wintertime is, you know, we do kind of need to kind of go into somewhat semi like a hibernation.
Mm-hmm. We want to get cozy, you know, and our body wants that too.
What about people who live in more warmer regions?
Yeah. Even with the warmth, you know, there's those seasonal changes, like the plants still need to rest, and so do we. You know, just because the temperature might not be hot, like if we're in Florida, like we still have a significant drop in temperature. It might still be like summer to us in Wisconsin, but it's still, nature is slowing down and having a reset. And so even though we can still do stuff outside in hotter climates, we still need to like honor that and maybe be more intentional yet with that. You can still be subjected to illness during that time, even with the warmer temperatures. So other things, you know, making sure your diet is right. Winter time, you know, I believe there's more citrus fruits in the warmer climates. So, you know, having that in our diet is great. But, you know, like we're wanting to eat more like root vegetables and hearty meals and soups and fats. Like if you eat animals in your diet, like it's a time for that, or dried fruits. You know, we're not necessarily eating raspberries and tomatoes because that's not what's growing fresh, you know, unless we've preserved it. So making sure that your diet shifts with that too, like what is in season in your area. And if you're in a climate where you can't go get fresh food, then that's pulling on those root vegetables and what you stored away. Too, I like, it's might sound silly, but like I try not to eat fresh tomatoes in the winter because one, it's just going to be a disappointment buying a grocery store tomato.
My brother just brought home a thing of tomatoes today, and I said, "This is so sad." And I said, "You know, just you're not meant to have everything all year long."
Right. Our bodies, even though we're not like, so we're not connected with nature anymore, but our bodies still are, like from our genetic components, our chemical components, our hormonal components. So they're craving the things that go with the flow of the seasons. So just because it's accessible, like we can't do that. And I think it's a challenge to start like making these shifts now in terms of our diet, in terms of the way we harvest food and process food. Like any small shift now helps as we see food insecurity issues increasing. and, you know, like supply chain issues. Like that's why a lot of us are here in this group, is to learn these skills and build community. It's now is the time to start practicing it while we still have some of these structures in place, that we can like have some room for forgiveness in our trials and errors, you know, because like we don't want to be learning this in a time of absolute crisis. You know, we don't want to be going through the coping of like, oh, I can't get my tomato anymore. Like I need this now. Like, as we start to bring some personal discipline to ourselves and our family, we're going to see the rewards and benefits in our own personal lives, but it'll help make us all the more resilient as we move forward as a community.
And I think building community is so important. And that's one of the components of the Neighborhood Food Network, is starting to build. And I've met a lot of people in my neighborhood that I never would have met before. And, you know, you end up learning something from everyone.
Right.
So, wow. So this has been fantastic. Does anybody else have any other questions? Or we only really scheduled her for a half hour, but we've been much longer, but you've been fantastic. Do you have any final pearls of wisdom you can share with us? I mean, I could have you on for 5 hours, but
right. I'd be more than welcome to come on again.
oh, I'd love that.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk more about other things, but I'm definitely a proponent of doing things like meditation and breathing and movement. And how do we regulate our nervous system with stress, and practicing those things now in not a stressful situation, so that you can pull on those tools when you are in a stressful situation. So stress management, healthy movement, breathing, that also helps promote wellness in your body and fight illness. If you're not eating right, if you're not moving right, if you're not regulating your stress hormones, like you will be more susceptible for that. So it's not just the things we consume in response to symptoms, but how are we slowly integrating these things in our life so that we're going to have this holistic approach overall.
So I'm going to post again Crystal's contact information, and I highly recommend everybody get on her email list. And she's got her website there that everybody check out. We would love to have you back again. One thing I wanted to say about stress, and everybody here may know it, but for those of you who may not, when your body's in stress, you're basically in fight or flight. And once you're in fight or flight, your body shuts down all non-essential functions, and your immune system happens to be one of those. So when they say that stress will make you sick, it absolutely will make you sick. So I agree with slowing down, being intentional in what we do. Everybody here all knows, you know, how important it is to eat organic. I would love to have you on again, because Zen will love this. And I don't know if you know that much about Moms Across America, but we've been promoting eating organic and eating locally and getting to know your farmers and making your own medicine and making your own body products. Like I said, I'm making my own soap. I make practically everything. I figure out everything that's going to go in or on my body. I'm going to figure out how to make it myself. So
it's a lot of fun doing it together. I have a friend who taught me to make my own laundry soap, and she's doing like some zero waste sorts of things. And so we're kind of like sharing knowledge together. And actually I'm doing a holiday market at the end of November, and she's doing it the week before me. And so we're deciding to make a product together to like show our community together and like collaborate from what we've learned in our relationship. And
where is that? Is that up in Green Bay?
It'll be in Green Bay. There's a coffee house that is holding space for community vendors to have some be able to sell some of their things too. So It's exciting though, like, cause like when you start to learn together and do things together, it's like you're practicing these skills that are going to come through times of need. And my friend Brittany and I, it was like about maybe a year ago, I had a year and a half ago, my washer and dryer in my apartment building was out of commission. She's like, Crystal, don't go to the laundromat. You come use my washer and dryer. And so I was vulnerable and I went over there and used it. And we spent the time talking about the lack of community and how we need to reclaim that. And I said to her, you know, our ancestors, they used to wash their laundry down together by the river. And now's the time for us to wash our laundry by the river.
And you want to know something interesting, because I looked this up. I'm a firm believer in root cause. I want to know, like, I'm fascinated. How did our ancestors come up with these medicines and all that? But the people that were washing down by the river after they were doing the cooking upstairs, I mean, up the hill, the ash and the animal fat was running into the water, and they noticed that it was getting their clothes cleaner.
Yeah.
And that's where they came up by creating soap. So I just, I just think that's really interesting. So
it's really great. Yeah. We're much smarter than we give ourselves credit for, like in terms of figuring out problems ourselves, and we don't always have to buy the solution.
So yeah, my hope is that I'm going to start putting together all this stuff up as recipes and things to making our own body care products, and up on the neighborhood food network, and our own medicines, and getting everybody to move away from allopathic medicine, move away from the mass production of selling us things that we don't need, that are actually harming us, and that we all spread the word.
Right.
If anybody who knows me knows that I talk a lot. So, and we try to educate, and one of my favorite saying is, it's a good day when you learn something new. So today is definitely a good day.
Definitely.
Does anybody else have anything they want to say before we sign off? Okay, well, Crystal, thank you. We definitely want to have you back on. And Frankie's like, oh my God, I found my home. I don't know if she actually found a place to live or she likes it here, but we'll take it. So thank you so
Crystal.
much, everybody. And Crystal,
so
yes. And we will see everybody next week. I'm not sure who we're having on. I can't remember, but I will let everybody know when I send out the email and the link to this video, so we can share the video and watch it again. So thank you so much, Crystal, and everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Been lovely.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thanks, Crystal. Bye, everyone.
Everyone.